The story that our campaign through my career is telling Winnipeggers, I think, is very different from what Winnipeggers have heard before. So I'm from the nonprofit sector, but we're using business tools. So it's something that is very different, I think, to Winnipeg. And because we're using different tools, we're able to say things like, gang members make pretty good employees. Supportive housing does not cost money. That's a story we've been told which is just not true. It actually saves money. We can have a massive reduction in our carbon footprint in creating jobs for young people, and that also can be done in a way with modern business tools that does not cost money. So it kind of upsets, I think, the traditional narratives that we've been introduced to. So things like having debates between more police and less police, or do we want to have jobs or lower our carbon footprint? Do we want to have libraries or good roads? So I think Winnipeg can do more than one thing at once, but we have to do things differently. So that's a real feature of our campaign, I think. And the CBC debate is on Wednesday, so looking forward to that. I'm right in the middle of five candidates that made the debate stage. They've already done the draw. And the format is 30 seconds for question, 30 seconds for an answer. And I think if we had 5 minutes for a question and 5 minutes for an answer, we didn't have to prepare. None of us would. But for the 30 seconds, it requires a lot of preparation. And the Chamber of Commerce debate's on Friday. I did my interview this morning with Marcy Marcusa, and I know that those videos are being widely viewed as Winnipeggers are trying to figure out who to vote for. So I've been looking forward to talking to you guys. And one of the reasons is this woman named Shirley Muir, M-U-I-R. And so she's a big fan of your program. Do you know her?
I know her daughter Kit was a grad from.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah,
so
she was a journalism major.
Shirley's doing a lot of our communications with PR House, and so you notice these pamphlets, for example, and they do super cool things. Like this is my career timeline. So instead of like a resume and just like here's stuff I've done, it actually feels like it has some movement to it, some purpose and some momentum. So even a relatively boring guy like me, a good storyteller can help. I'll just pass those around. There's one for you too, Caleb. Pass those around if you're interested. I would advise you to collect pamphlets and keep them for future reference. So yeah, we only have a half hour, so I could go on for the whole half hour, but that's probably enough.
The more than 300 people that we talked to had 6 items, 6 priorities that they wanted candidates to talk about. Yeah. We're going to start with the first one, which is transit.
Cool.
And that, of course, is Emma Honeybun.
Okay, Emma, awesome.
Hi there. I have some follow-up questions, Brian. But first of all, I just wanted to ask what your stance is on the transit system right now, and as mayor, what would you do about it?
Fantastic. So I've announced a revisioning of Transit Week, which I'm calling Metro Mobility. And it's a combination of using vans for what they're really good at and electric buses for what they're really good at. And other cities our size are using this system. So it's a transit on demand. You hit your phone and a wheelchair accessible van will come to a virtual bus stop near your house and whisk you to a regional location if you're going to someplace that's close by, or out to the rapid transit station, where a bus, an electric bus that arrives frequently would be taking you to a particular place that you want to go. So I'm just really pumped about it, because what other cities are finding when they're using this amalgamated single fare system is that a lot of people are saying, I don't need a car anymore, because the service is that good and it's better than a car and certainly cheaper. And I also think it's important to talk about how we're going to pay for it, because a lot of the system we're talking about is from the amalgamated transit plan, which we've said we're gonna take from a 25-year implementation phase down to 10. And one of the cool ways of paying, two primary ways of paying for it. One is to have transit-oriented development. The urban planners call it TOD, transit-oriented development. So those new residential and commercial units, the property taxes from those units that are located on dedicated transit ways would be dedicated to pay for new transit. Because I think that transit is so valuable that it can actually pay for itself just based on attracting people to a car-free lifestyle. The second thing we've said, which is very unique in the campaign, is that we are going to charge what's equivalent of 25 cents a day for each surface commercial parking spot. So you would see malls in particular paying a fair bit for their parking spots, and it's equal to about 5 cents a visit for every car that goes to transit, and that would raise about $10 million a year as well. So we're pretty pumped about what transit can look like in Winnipeg, but it has to attract new riders, and the way to do that is to really increase service, and frequency, safety is a big part of that as well, which I could also talk about. But yeah, some important innovations that are other cities around the world our size are adopting.
You also pledged to implement transit peace officers.
Yes.
Would that be funded by the transit budget or the police budget?
So we are committed to a 3.7% property tax increase with no frontage levy increases. It's far less than Councillor Gillingham's 7.5% tax increase. I just had to mention that in context. And so we have fully costed out, I think it's 25 peace officers, so unarmed people, like you can think of Bear Clan or Mama Bear Clan, those types of folks that have those kind of mediation skills. But we fully costed out that plan as part of our 3.7% property tax increase. Exactly what it is, I've actually forgotten already, but you could look it up. We have a fully costed plan on our website. I'm thinking it's $700,000 a year. It's not inexpensive, but I think an important element of having a safe transit system.
And, sorry, last question.
No, great. Good questions.
The safe transit system, do you think frequency plays a big role in that? Or how are you prioritizing frequency for safety?
Well, like I think we can do all of them at the same time. We want to renegotiate the tri-level transit agreement that was negotiated already. And I mean, one of the things that's in there is a purchase of another 135 diesel buses. It's rather astonishing to me that we're still buying diesel buses. And we want to replace those diesel buses with these electric vans, which solves a lot of problems because the charging infrastructure you need is far less and there's less capital costs. But there'll be lots of savings in switching from diesel buses to vans. And we want to use some of those savings to plow back into safety. So the peace officers is a part of that. But we also want to have this really cool app that other cities are using called See Something, Say Something. So bus riders can, when they're on their phone, I mean, I ride the bus a lot, and lots of people we're on our phones all the time anyways. I happen to play solitaire. But you can say, okay, there's something happening on this bus, and the transit peace officers can be notified, and as quickly as possible jump on the bus at the next stop, and they'll already have an idea what's happening and where it's happening on the bus and be gathering a lot of that information. And that also helps transit to deploy the peace officers so they know what bus routes are, people feel the least safe on, for example. And I also think that'll increase, or should say decrease fare evasion, which is a significant issue right now as well. Yeah, thank you. Good questions, Emma.
Moving on to the topic of roads with Caleb.
Thank you, Mr. Loney. I'm covering the issue of roads. I just want to know generally what you think of the issue, and then I'll have some follow-up questions.
Okay, good. So I've announced a fix it first policy. It's very unique on the campaign. And what I mean by that is we cannot afford to build new roads when we're already having difficulties maintaining the roads that we already have. And Councillor Gillingham has promised over $1 billion of new or expanded road systems in Winnipeg. And I think he's going to have a lot of troubles getting federal cost sharing for it, because in the case of widening Kenniston, the feds have already rejected the plan not once but twice. The feds are putting money into transit, so I'd far rather, instead of doubling down on car culture, is put the money into transit, and then instead of raising taxes beyond the 3.7%, which I've committed to, is to look after the roads that we already have. Secondly, we've announced a, what did we call it, a road construction material innovation fund, which would work with both Red River College and University of Manitoba to, we're going to hive off at 0.1% of infrastructure projects and then put it into a research and development program so that we can research different kinds of materials and try to find the materials that are best for our environment, and then also look at what other jurisdictions are doing in terms of, like, if you, for example, mix in a certain percentage of rubber, shredded rubber into the pavement, like, would that help with the freezing and thawing? Like, we would want to test a bunch of those things and see if we can come up with the right blend of construction materials.
Okay, thank you. How do you propose to fix existing roads so they won't simply disintegrate every year? This is a huge time and expense issue. Fixing roads every year isn't sustainable.
I like the word disintegrate. That's about what's happening too. Well, I think that's the trick, is getting more people on transit, and secondly, just really ramping down the building. Winnipeg has this very chronic problem of building new roads, and we can't afford to maintain the roads that we have. So our message is pretty unique in that regard, and it comes out in an interesting issue, Portage in Maine. And I'll be the only candidate, as far as I know, on the debate stage on Wednesday night that has come out firmly, or at least the only candidate of the top 3 or 4 that have said we need to have a downtown that is people friendly, and we can find ways to move traffic efficiently and have a downtown that's people friendly. But just saying we're going to keep Portage and Maine closed is not in Winnipeg's best interest. But reason why I raise it, Caleb, is because I think that Winnipeg is just too deep into car culture, and we've got to turn that around, like other cities are doing. It's a good question.
We're going to switch topics. We're going to move up to active transportation.
Okay.
Bridge.
Am I taking too long to answer?
Not at all.
Okay, good job, Caleb.
How important is active transportation to you, and what do you plan to do about it?
Well, fantastic question. It's really important to me. I biked here today from Norwood. I have biked to every one of my announcements except for one. And believe me, Bartley Kivas is checking on me. The first announcement I made after I registered is that I will not be taking a car to work at City Hall. I'm going to be cycling, skating, walking, or taking transit. And we've announced another $20 million, part of our 3.7% tax increase, so $20 million additional for active transportation infrastructure over the next 4 years. So combining those things, I think, would suggest to cyclists that building out an awesome active transportation system is pretty important to me.
How do you specifically plan to distribute that extra $20 million?
Well, the city has an active transportation plan, bike infrastructure plan, and I kind of see it in two components. So the first component is making sure when we're building infrastructure that the tenders go out and they include sidewalks, they include street lights, they include curbs, all these things, and they have to include be consistent with the active transportation policy that's already been passed by council. But for some reason, the city administration brings tenders forward that don't include the active transportation lanes. And so I'm gonna turn things around in the administration and say, that's okay, if you wanna bring a tender forward that isn't consistent with the bike plan, you gotta come to council and get an exemption. And the reason why I love that is because then it'll turn the bike community on council, and they're not gonna like that. There's a pretty active lobby, and I think that's a good way to take advantage of that. So that turns that around. The second thing is that the 20 million would mostly be used for connecting existing bike lanes to each other. So many places, I use the example of Kingston Row, where I'm around there a lot. I mean, you're coming up Dunkirk Drive, and you're just enjoying the ride, just as awesome, and then it just stops. So, and then you're like forced out onto the road. So we need the money to connect bike lanes to each other, and that's what the $20 million would primarily be for. And I also want Winnipeggers to know that active transportation, it isn't just for cyclists. Like, the more people that are cycling, the fewer cars there are. And I do object to the bike lobby talking about cycling as a climate initiative, because to be honest, I don't think it makes a big difference as far as climate goes. But does it ever make a difference to your mental health, to your physical health, even to your spiritual well-being? Like, in all honesty, I was kind of grumpy when I got on my bike because I made the mistake of going on Twitter before I came here. And, oh, that's so frustrating. But after a nice bike ride and the leaves are falling down on me and it was so quiet and I feel the exercise, I just felt awesome when I walked in here. So I think I want to tell Winnipeggers that this is, cycling has so many benefits. And yeah, climate, but yeah, there's so many other benefits that our society really needs now. And just taking a few minutes to slow down every day in our commute is part of that as well.
That's all I have, thank you.
Okay, good questions, thank you.
So next on to homelessness with Shaun, who's teamsing in by virtual.
How do you spell it, Shauna?
SHAUNA.
That's good, good. Your top marks already.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on homelessness in Winnipeg, and how do you plan on addressing it?
Good question. This is running for mayor was not on my bucket list. I don't know if you've seen our campaign video, but a year ago, April, I was minding my own business as a active citizen and was cleaning up this homeless camp near my house in Norwood. And I realized that a woman had been living in a crack of a cottonwood tree. There were Christmas decorations hanging on the tree. And it was right then, it's like, this is the last straw for me. And I've been working in the inner city, and I just realized that our city was not good at addressing problems. It was just really revolves around managing problems in probably the most expensive way possible. And that woman, I don't know who she is. I've never met her, but she's been with me every day, 500 plus days of this campaign. And I feel like her voice is projecting to the city through me in many ways. And I want Winnipeggers to know that addressing homelessness is not a money issue. I can pretty much guarantee you that every other candidate that's come here has talked about pilot projects. They've talked about shuffling money around. They've made a nice statements about we're gonna go and get the province and the feds on side, as though no one's ever thought about that before. And the problem is that governments think that addressing homelessness costs money, and it's absolutely, utterly false. And this is why I started talking about how there are new tools to address these old, stubborn problems. Because solutions are cheaper than managing problems. A group of 100 homeless people can trigger 2,000 contacts with emergency services over the course of a year. 2,000. So our approach is quite simple, is we're gonna invite, and they will take me up on this, the Winnipeg Police, to identify groups of 100 people who are currently in constant contact with them. And that's the first thing, is that the police get to identify the people that we're gonna be working with. Number two, that the police then say the amount of money that they are putting towards responding to that particular group. And number three, that they would negotiate agreements with nonprofits and agree to pay them depending on how successful the nonprofits are at reducing their workload. And it is this, what I'm pitching is different, and I would argue that different is the only thing that's gonna work, because what we're doing now is not working. So it's shockingly simple, 3-step process, and we have it's all laid out on our website at shaunforwinnipeg.com in a release that is endorsed by many national nonprofits, local nonprofits, and when I made the announcement, standing next to me was a guy named Gord Friesen, who is a 35-year police officer with the Winnipeg Police Service, and the last 8 years of his career was on the police executive. And he said, this, what Loney is talking about, is a game changer. The police will love this, and this is how we need to proceed here in the city.
To follow up, do you think that is the best resources to put police on? Like going to encampments and identifying?
Yeah, well,
Using nonprofits?
I wouldn't advocate necessarily for nonprofits to be responding to 911 calls. That's not what I'm advocating. I'm advocating for, let's have a look at the people that are in constant contact with police. And I'm talking, there's a group of Winnipeggers that is in constant contact with police, like every day, some of them. And let's look at those and reduce the number of police dispatches. So my competitors, some of them are talking about, oh, we should have more helicopters or less helicopters. We should have a different police board or no police board at all. We should have more cops or less cops. And I think it all completely misses the point. And the point is this: the people who are committing offenses are going to do so over and over and over again until they get access to the interventions that we all know work. And the great news is those interventions are actually cheaper than responding all the time. And the other thing about my plan is that when a nonprofit supports a group of 100 people, the financial impact is not just on the police, it's also on the healthcare system and on the justice system. And so in the United States, hospitals are building housing for homeless people. Why? Because it saves money. So that's why I'm saying this is not a money issue. This is a systems issue, and this is my game.
Okay, thank you. And you pledged to create a $100 million land trust to provide affordable housing for people living in bus shelters and encampments along the waterways. So how do you plan on paying for this project?
Thank you for asking that question. So it's a $100 million community housing land trust, correct? There's zero taxpayer money involved. So if you look at the Winnipeg Foundation financials, it's on their website, there's one of 10,000 foundations in Canada. And they have $220 million invested in real estate and mortgages. And the land trust is going to give them an option, a new option, which is not available to them right now, to get a financial rate of return on their real estate money and a social rate of return. So it's actually a way that we can help the foundation increase its impact. And secondly, we're going to go to you and say, are you interested in investing in nonprofit housing? We're going to give you, the land trust will give you, say, a 3% rate of return. So Shauna invests $1,000, and the way it works is that the land trust would give you a $30 check every year, which would be a 3% rate of return. And at the end of 5 years, we would ask you if you want your principal back. And 70% of people say, could you please keep it? Keep doing what we're doing because it's making me happy. And these land trusts are becoming very successful in the UK and most recently in Toronto. And if you look at our press release, I quote the executive director of the Parkdale Land Trust in Toronto, and they went from 1 million in assets to 140 million in assets in 3 years, based largely on innovative relationships with foundations. So I'm very confident we can pull this off, but we have to realize that we need to use these capitalist tools, these market tools, or it's just like a squirt gun on a forest fire. And so that's what this land trust is all about, moving this housing land out of market speculation and leaning into what nonprofit housing, co-op housing does, which is provide love and compassion and a safe place for people to live and offer that as part of the investment. And that's currently not on offer right now. Thank
Moving
you.
on to the police budget, the Winnipeg police budget specifically.
Yeah, for
Sierra.
sure. So Sierra, covering the topic of the police budget here in Winnipeg, and I just want to get what your general feelings and thoughts are about the Winnipeg police budget right now, in the state that it's in right now.
Yeah, well, I actually believe that the police have dialed 911 on their workload. They're exhausted with trying to keep up. We dispatched them 238,000 times last year. It's over 660 times a day. And they're about law enforcement. They respond after something has happened. And believe me, if we could have arrested our way out of this issue, we would have done so long ago. 9 out of 10 of new hires at the City of Winnipeg, new positions at the City of Winnipeg since 1999 have gone to emergency services. So Winnipeggers wondering why our libraries are underfunded, why our recreation system's underfunded, should have a look at that stat. So I am not in favor of defunding, and I am not in favor of just keep doing what we're doing. And this is a good example of how I think differently, I think, from the other candidates. So my approach is to cut the police workload, and I've committed to cutting it by 10%. How do we do that? Well, you might know my background is I work in the social enterprise sector, so these nonprofit businesses, and we're hiring gang members to work in the trades, and it works remarkably well. And so we're going to add 1,000 new social enterprise jobs, focusing on people who are in constant contact with police, and that subset of people that are interested in working or are able to work, because not everyone is. And the second group we want to focus on is back to the homelessness issue, because a big chunk of the police workload is responding to people who are in perpetual crisis because they're lacking housing and or addiction and mental health treatment. And so I think we can quite easily cut the police workload by 10%. And then what happens is that the police won't need these annual increases that have been going on for 20 years. And that begins to, as a percentage of the budget, to free up resources for other things. Plus, more and more the police budget is directed towards nonprofits. So it comes out of the police budget, but it's going towards nonprofits, and they see what nonprofits are doing as a public safety tool. So we're not asking the police to pay for supportive housing. We're asking police to pay for the impact that supportive housing has on their system. It's a very new and innovative way of addressing the problem.
Yeah, for sure. So you say that you're wanting to cut the police workload by 10%, but how is that going to be impacted as our city continues to grow and the population of Winnipeg nears that 1 million mark? What are you going to do to control that growth?
Yeah, well, that's the whole opportunity, I think, is to look at this 240,000 police dispatches, and the target would be to get that down by 10% and hold it there. And I think given the power of social enterprises, employing people of all kinds of different barriers to employment, to work in all kinds of different sectors, and the power of these procurement tools to modernize the relationship between nonprofits and government agencies. You apply those two things to the people that the police are most frequently in contact with. I have every confidence that what's going to happen with this is we're actually going to free the police up to be able to respond more quickly when we need them, and to focus on things like hate crimes and child porn and also blue collar crime, things like that that are, I think, under-resourced now.
Sure, one question about that.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Kalkidan, crime prevention.
Yes, hi, my name is Kelvin, so I'm gonna be asking you questions about crime prevention. First, if you could, say a couple things, how you feel about, how crime prevention is done right now, and what are your plans to kind of, aid that in the future and make Winnipeg a safer city?
I'm not entirely sure there is much crime prevention going on right now. 75% of people, when they're in contact with the, say, justice system, are back in contact with the justice system within 2 years once they get out. It's an astonishingly high, we call it recidivism rate. And so what I want to do is offer police and the justice system a new public safety tool. And that's the public safety benefits that the nonprofit sector is offering. And the systems, the police, for example, can choose the option that offers them the best reduction in crime and for the best taxpayer dollar. And so let me give you an example. So you might be familiar with Build, that I've co-founded with many others, and we hire people at Build that are otherwise, they're basically incarcerated almost all the time. So we say to the justice system, okay, here's 100 people. They're basically incarcerated all the time. That's $5,000 a month per person. And the justice system will say, well, easily, when you take legal aid, plus incarceration costs, plus court appearance, the cost of court appearances, those three costs, just the justice system, $5,000 a month per person. And this is how exciting the way I think is, and around social innovation is, the question to the justice system is, will you pay $2,500 a month for every month they're not incarcerated? Shockingly simple. But the reason why I'm running for mayor is because the culture of governments is to think that the things that the nonprofit sector can do costs money, when in fact they save money, but we need to modernize how these agencies relate to each other. So I think we can do a massive amount of crime prevention by making sure nonprofits have the resources to offer to people a customized wraparound services that they need, and to make sure that nonprofits are paid for the impact that their intervention has on these systems. And it is damn exciting, because I walked into a bus shelter last week, and there were 3 people in there. This is one of the most visited bus shelters in the city by Winnipeg police. And I talked to the 3 human beings living in the bus shelter. And I said, I'm Shaun Loney, I'm running for mayor. I obviously wasn't there to get votes, but I said, I co-founded Build. Have you guys heard of Build before? And 2 of them lit up. They lit up because they said, I want to work at Build. Can I get a job at Build? And I said, look, if I can pull off being mayor by October 26th, I'm coming back here and we're going to make arrangements. But I need to pull this off in order to be able to offer to you that solution. And I left that bus shelter feeling inspired. And that's the kind of city that I want to lead. And that's the kind of city that I want to live in. That's what crime prevention looks like to me.
And then could you specify which nonprofits you're talking about when you mentioned you want to have nonprofits that are aiding with crime prevention and the ones that you're going to be like kind of supporting? Could you
Sure.
have specific ones in mind that you can talk about?
So people who are struggling, they need different kinds of supports, and different solutions will work for different people. So if you're an Indigenous person that's interested in working in the trades, Build would be an excellent example. If you're connected with Abilities Manitoba and you're considered to be part of the disabilities community, there's a group of nonprofits there that know people in that community and will have the entrepreneurial skills to offer solutions. If you're addicted to meth, it's going to be something like a Moorburg House kind of solution. If you're a young person that is traveling from city to city, a resource assistance for youth. I think it's like, what nonprofit are you connected to now? So Salome Mission, hundreds of people line up there every day for something to eat and a place to stay. So they know those people. They have a relationship with those people. So I would say whatever nonprofit you have a relationship with is the one that we want to be working with you, because you trust them. And that's the secret sauce of nonprofits, is that they've been providing love and compassion to people, and they're trusted, and they have these relationships who are going to be critically important going forward.
And then could you talk about your plan, if you have any plans to address violent crime towards Indigenous women and girls within the city?
Yes, thank you. I wear a moose hide patch, and the moose hide campaign to me is an invitation to men and boys to have conversations about how to be respectful to women, people who identify as women or non-binary, and girls. So I want to have a city conversation through the Moose Hide campaign, primarily with men and boys. I think that's critical. Secondly, we've announced like the social enterprise jobs. A chunk of those jobs will be set aside for women who are interacting with the city's women's centers. We've announced this amazing tree trust based on a tree trust in Cleveland and in Minneapolis. And the tree trust, the jobs of planting, taking care of trees, and doing green infrastructure in the city, we want to set those jobs aside for women who are interacting with the city's women's centers. And I want to offer a ride-hailing service called Ikway Safe Ride for women, by women, that it would be a business that would make sure women have safe transportation needs, and that it also creates employment for women as well. And I think just generally focusing on meeting with MMIW families, which I've said in my first 100 days in office, I want to do that at least once, and to maintain a constant relationship with those families, because they know what the community needs, and be able to respond as a city administration to them in as meaningful way as possible. Great questions, thank you.
These are all the questions that I have.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I suppose so. Can he ask a question? Is that allowed?
I'm not supposed to, so I'm going to anyway. It's very clear that you're quite excited about systems change, about new models of doing things. What do you do about people who aren't excited?
So,
What do you do about administrative and
So
bureaucratic inertia?
so the two questions I am most asked on the campaign trail. Number one, led by my mother, can you smile more often? Number two is that question. I get it every day.
There's a reason.
Yeah. And so, to me, I know it's hard. I know it's hard. But this is not my first rodeo. Build, for example, does $6 million a year business with Manitoba Housing. It was not easy to do. And I've written, don't hold this against me, but I've written some books. And one of them is called The Beautiful Bailout, which revolves around an Indian agent. And I compare this Indian agent from 1905 to current civil servants who act like this guy from 1905. And I've got, the guy's name's William Graham. I've got his diary. And the nemesis of the Indian agent, or the civil servant that wants to keep things the way they are, I call them entrepreneurs. So people who are geared towards changing the system from the inside. And I want to find these entrepreneurs in the city system, and I want to train them, and I want to say your instincts are good. I want to give them a direct line to the mayor's office. And I want to say I want the city to be like a big circle. And if there are people standing outside the circle, I want to know what the barriers are preventing them to be a part of the circle. And there's a school in Toronto called the School of Social Entrepreneurship that actually does the training of these entrepreneurs. And they're mostly women, and they're mostly younger. And I'm going to find them, and I'm going to say 3 words: go for it. They have the pressure coming from the outside in terms of innovation, and these entrepreneurs trained up on the inside that know how to change the systems to support problem solvers, because we have to stop focusing on the problems and focus instead of making it easy for the problem solvers. So one of the books I've written is called An Army of Problem Solvers, and that's what I want the city to be, an army of problem solvers. Great question. Fascinating to me how often it comes up, and it's not even like come up in different ways. It's like the question is even pitched in a very similar fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
and I am one stubborn.
if you've covered City Hall enough, if you've covered the halls of justice
Yeah.
enough, if you've covered the provincial legislature enough, you kind of come to understand that maybe change is hard to come by sometimes.
Yeah, and at some point when you're cleaning up a homeless camp, when there was a woman living in a tree, you say, fuck it, I'm running for mayor. That's what this is about. This is an entire change campaign. And when I'm talking about doing things differently, yeah, it's disruptive. It's very disruptive, but it's the only thing that's going to work at this point in time is doing things differently. And if you look at the endorsements on our campaign website, there's like former Conservative cabinet ministers, there's NDP, former NDP politicians, there's people from the Chambers of Commerce, there's people from the nonprofit sector. It's like, what the heck's going on here? And there's environmentalists, there's people from the green energy sector. So I just think it's people that are close to the community, and they're just saying, I have zero confidence that we just keep yelling at each other from these two different perches that we're going to get to where we need to go. And so, yeah, I am opposed to defunding the police. One of the reasons is because it's not going to happen. I was in Minneapolis where George Floyd died. I was standing right there, right where the police officer put his foot on George Floyd's neck, and they couldn't get a defunding package through Minneapolis City Council. What the hell is the point of talking about it here in Winnipeg? Do you actually think that that's going to happen? And when the benefits are in the healthcare system, why are we only talking about defunding the police? It leaves the nonprofit sector undervalued. And in the end, when you're sitting in a circle with Indigenous elders, they say, you know what? Our economies were working well when the key feature of our economies were that solutions were valued. And that's what our campaign is really about, is finding ways to value solutions that make it easy for problem solvers. And we'll definitely need these entrepreneurs to make it happen.
We're gonna have to leave it there.
Okay,
Thank
great
you, Shaun.
question, thank you, yeah. Was that everybody?
Yeah.
Wow, that was quick.